He never craved praise, never expected anything back. Mark Wilson, a seasoned trucker with tired eyes and a tender heart, noticed an elderly man quietly forgoing his meal to pinch pennies. No one else saw, but Mark did. He covered the cost and left before the man could say a word. A month later, a pristine rig rolled up outside that same diner, paired with a note that would shift everything. Hit like and tell us where you're watching from. Your support brings more inspiring tales. Let's get started. Rain started to fall as Mark Wilson guided his truck into the gravel lot outside Daisy's Diner. It was his usual haunt. Same window seat, same black coffee, same stillness. At 56, Mark had settled into solitude. He liked it that way. The road was grueling but steady. No bonds, no troubles, just endless highways and a cab that felt more like home than any house ever had. Inside, the scent of bacon and old coffee hung in the air. The bell above the door rang as Mark stepped in, nodding politely to the waitress behind the counter. Her name tag read Clara, and she gave a smile rooted in routine, not warmth. He slid into a booth quietly, staring out at the rain-splattered window. That's when he spotted the elderly man at the counter. Slumped shoulders, trembling hands. A worn veteran's cap pulled low over a weary, lined face. The man had ordered a sandwich and coffee, but when the bill came, Mark saw him counting coins carefully, slowly, then gently sliding the sandwich back toward the waitress with a courteous shake of his head. That subtle gesture hit Mark hard. He stood, leaving his meal half-eaten, and walked to the register. Clara looked up. "Put his tab on mine," he murmured, just loud enough. "Don't tell him." Clara's brows lifted, then softened. "You?" "Sure," Mark nodded faintly. He looked hungry. "That's enough." Before she could say more, he dropped a 20, tipped his cap, and stepped into the light rain. No bold words, no dramatic pause, just a man who did something kind because someone needed it and no one else would. Inside, the old man didn't even glance up. He reached for his sandwich again as Clara slid it back, smiling without explanation. Outside, Mark climbed into his cab, wiped the mist from the windshield, and drove into the afternoon's gray fog. By the time the wipers cleared his view, the diner had faded in the rear view, just like the moment he chose to leave behind. But kindness, once planted, grows roots in places you never foresee. The weeks that followed were a haze of long roads and lonely rest stops. Mark Wilson kept moving, as always. From Austin to Des Moines, Chicago to Laramie, he hauled loads with quiet focus, an old cassette deck humming soft country melodies in the background. His CB radio stayed mostly silent, so did he. The memory of the old man at Daisy's Diner didn't haunt him, but it stayed, soft and persistent. Not for what Mark had done, but for the look in the man's eyes, dignity wrapped in fatigue, pride worn thin. Mark had seen that look before. In rest-stop mirrors, in the rear view after a tough day, and long ago, in his father's eyes after the mill shut down. Still, life marched on. It had to. The morning sun was just rising when Mark returned to that stretch of highway where Daisy's Diner sat like a faded relic from another time. He hadn't meant to stop, but something pulled him back. Maybe the smell of real bacon, or maybe the memory of being seen in a world that rarely looked up. He parked his truck, stepped into the crisp morning air, and crossed the lot. That's when he noticed it. Across the street, on a flatbed trailer parked neatly parallel to the diner, sat a gleaming midnight blue Kenworth T680, brand new, untouched. Sunlight glinted off its polished chrome and spotless windows. It was the kind of rig drivers only dreamed of. No markings, no logo, just keys on the hood and a folded note taped to the side mirror. Mark's boots slowed on the gravel as he approached. He looked around, half expecting a prank or cameras, but the road was empty, the diner quiet, the truck real. His pulse raced as he reached for the note. His calloused fingers shook slightly as he unfolded it. 3 words were written boldly. At the top, for Mark Wilson, nothing more. Not yet. Mark glanced back at the diner, dazed. Clara stood inside, frozen behind the counter, eyes wide. She'd seen the truck too, and now she stared at him like a fairy tale had stepped into reality. Mark blinked hard, his heart thumping. Who would do this? Why? He turned the note over. What he read next froze him in place. Mark's hand trembled as he opened the note fully. The handwriting was steady, deliberate, each word carrying weight. Beyond ink, dear Mr. Wilson, you helped a stranger that day. That stranger was my father. He told me, tears in his eyes, that someone truly saw him for the first time in years. You didn't ask his name. You didn't wait for thanks. A week later, he passed away peacefully, but he left this world with dignity because of you. My name is Daniel Hayes. My father was Benjamin Hayes, founder of Hayes Transport. I don't know what moved you to step in that day, but I know what it meant to him. Please accept this truck not as charity, but as a tribute to a man who valued decency and to the stranger who gave it freely. The title is yours. Keys are yours. No strings. Thank you for what you did when no one was watching. Daniel Hayes. Mark stood motionless, the wind brushing his flannel shirt. The world seemed to quiet around him. The note crinkled in his hand, but its meaning sank deeper than paper. Benjamin Hayes. Mark remembered him clearly now. The way he'd tried to return. That sandwich as if it was too much to ask. A man who carried his pride like a uniform, even when everything else had faded. A veteran, a father, a man holding on. Now gone, Mark's jaw clenched. Not from grief, he barely knew him, but from something deeper, a blend of sorrow and wonder. A small act had rippled outward, returning not just in kind, but in grace. Behind him, the diner's bell rang softly. Clara stepped out, apron still tied, eyes glossy. You okay? She asked gently, her voice quivering with emotion. Mark looked at her, the note still open in his hand. No, he said, voice heavy with feeling. But I think I will be. He turned to the truck. It wasn't just a machine. It was a monument, a thank you etched in chrome and steel, a man's final message through his son. For the first time in years, Mark felt seen too. He stepped forward, ran his hand along the cool metal of the rig, then pressed his palm against the door, his head resting gently against it. The wind carried only silence. He didn't speak. He stood quietly, letting tears fall. The keys felt light in his hand, but they carried the weight of a life. Mark sat in the cab of the brand-new Kenworth, fingers tracing the leather-wrapped steering wheel. The scent of fresh upholstery, pure and untouched, filled the space. Every button gleamed, every surface spotless. No miles, no history, just a new chapter waiting to be written. For a man who'd driven half his life in rusted rigs and patched seats, this felt unreal. He turned the key halfway, just to hear it. The dashboard lit up in a quiet symphony, humming to life. The engine stayed off, but that hum filled the silence with something sacred. Mark leaned back, staring through the windshield, hands in his lap, heart still catching up. He wasn't a man who cried easily. He'd lived through breakups, breakdowns, snowed-in highways, and the loneliness only truckers know. But this was different. It wasn't about the truck. It was about being remembered, about being part of something that outlasted a single moment. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. Clara approached slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. Daniel called the diner this morning, asked if you still stopped here. I had no idea what he meant until the flatbed showed up. Mark looked at her, still overwhelmed. You talked to him? She nodded briefly. Said he searched for you for weeks. Traced your CB handle through a mechanic in Kansas. Said his father never stopped talking about you. Mark swallowed hard. I didn't even know his name. Doesn't matter, Clara said gently. You gave him something bigger then. A name. Mark looked out the window at the morning sun rising over the horizon. After a moment, he turned back to her. Feels like I should do something. Right back. Say something. You just did. She smiled. You showed up. Mark reached for the note, folded it with care, and tucked it into the glove compartment. Then he ran a hand across the dash, fingers settling on the ignition. He had roads to drive, but this time, he wasn't just moving forward. He was carrying someone with him. 3 weeks later, a sleek midnight Kenworth pulled into a rural truck stop off I-90. Its engine purred softly as it halted beside the pumps. Drivers turned, conversations stopped. The rig was spotless chrome, shining, tires so clean they looked dipped in ink. But it wasn't the truck that drew attention. It was the man behind the wheel. Mark Wilson stepped down slowly, adjusting his worn cap, still in the same flannel shirt he'd worn for years. His boots hit the pavement with quiet confidence. Something had shifted in him, not pride, not ego, but something quieter. A man at peace with his place in the world. He walked toward the fuel station, unhurried, nodding at a young driver staring. Openly, the kid glanced at the rig, then at Mark. That yours? He asked, eyes wide. Mark gave a small nod. Yeah, she's a beauty, the kid said. Mark smiled faintly. She is. Inside the diner at the stop, Clara's words echoed in his mind. You gave him something bigger than a name. He thought of Benjamin Hayes, the quiet man at the counter. A sandwich returned. A debt no one asked to repay. Mark slid into a booth and pulled a small notebook from his pocket. For the first time in years, he began to write, not a log, not a receipt, but a letter. Dear Daniel, I don't have the words to express what this means, but I hope you know. I'd do it again. Your father reminded me of my own quiet, proud, alone in ways no one should be. Thank you for letting me carry his memory down the road. I'll care for this rig. I'll care for his story too. Mark Wilson. He tore the page neatly, folded it, and tucked it into an envelope addressed to Hayes Transport. Attention Daniel Hayes. The next morning, it was mailed. Weeks later, a reply arrived. Mark, I read your letter 3 times. You're not driving alone anymore. You'll always have a place with us. Daniel. Mark placed the letter on the dash of his rig, beside a photo of his father he hadn't looked at in years. The road stretched ahead, endless as ever. But now he drove with purpose. Because sometimes a stranger's gratitude becomes the most meaningful mile you ever travel.